Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento. And in today's episode, we've got an amazing guest who I'm so excited about our conversation here today because she not only loves helping businesses flourish, but she also has a lot of tools in her marketing and business arsenal. So I'm excited to hear about all those things. So today's guest, her name is Crystina Clauson. Crystina is a formidable presence in restaurant support circles. She has spent 7 relentless years driving off-premise verticals and delivering exceptional results. With a remarkable track record of managing nearly $100 million yearly in online sales for a dozen brands, she has played a pivotal role in keeping hundreds of restaurants afloat during the challenging times of the COVID-19 pandemic. Adept at implementing loyalty programs, gift card systems, and online ordering platforms, Crystina's unwavering dedication stems from her deep admiration for restaurant operators and her relentless pursuit of making their lives easier. These strategies and tactics, and importantly, her thought process behind business and marketing is really going to open our eyes for our own industries, our own businesses. So I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Crystina Clauson. All right, Crystina, I am so excited that you're here with us today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Heck yeah. So I tease listeners just a little bit about your brilliant business mind and how excited I am to learn from you here today. But take us beyond the bio. Who the heck is Crystina? How did you end up doing all this amazing work that you're doing today?
I started at a restaurant brand. I had worked in telecom for years in operational support. And when, it was kind of a dinosaur. So when we all got laid off, I had a friend who said, hey, I need somebody to help me get all of our franchisees for our brand onto our online ordering. It was just supposed to be, a 90-day contract. And I ended up getting hired by the brand. The rest is sort of history with restaurants. The really cool thing about being able to work in off-premise verticals like online ordering before the pandemic was it was sort of a novelty to have online ordering for restaurants ahead of the pandemic. So I got to do a lot of learning, a lot of, people trusted me with, experimenting with different things with their brand. So when the pandemic actually started, we were ready to go. There were things that we didn't utilize, but we had sort of tested out. So like curbside, we had tested in Minnesota in May. And I know, Brian, we were talking about the weather. And in May in Minnesota, people love to walk to get out of their cars. So testing something like curbside in springtime in Minnesota, was kind of a bust, right? But we tested it in 2019. So when the pandemic started, we had already tested it. All of the pieces were in place. We literally just needed to flip a switch to get that working. Also, we had some restaurants who were bar heavy. So they didn't need online ordering before the pandemic, right? And, we let them know that it was there. But they, truly just didn't have the time or space for it. And then about 3 weeks into the pandemic, I talked to my leadership and I said, hey, these restaurants aren't going to survive if we don't sort of make some sort of accommodation for them. So I actually came up with an emergency protocol to get the rest of the restaurants with that brand onto online ordering. Within 2 weeks, we'll give you a specific core menu. You'll have to buy a tablet, take payment in the store, but we can get you online in 2 weeks. So you'll have some sort of income coming in during pandemic. So there were a lot of learnings that we had ahead of the pandemic. And then when we were implementing for the pandemic, we were able to turn around a lot of stuff really easily. And the brand that I worked for actually morphed into a holding company and started buying other brands. So I learned a lot about acquisitions and, helping restaurants who are failing succeed and what the focus is on that, right? And, the bottom line is, no matter how good your food is, no matter how exciting your concept is, no matter how cool an Instagram wall is in your restaurant, if you're not profitable, you will fail. At some point, the doors are going to close because you're paying people to take out your food. And when we were buying restaurants, I was amazed at the number of restaurants that were really awesome concepts, but just, not actually making any money on the back end because they weren't thinking about food costs. They weren't thinking about, their COGS, their labor, all of those important things that you should think about as a restaurant. So that sort of gave me a really good sort of holistic view about how large restaurant brands, sort of how they flow, how they work, and understanding, what it takes to make a successful restaurant. So it was really valuable, as these failed brands are being sort of snatched up and turned around. It was an awesome experience, to be sure. So I'm excited as an entrepreneur to be able to bring all of those learnings into helping, restaurants that want to scale, restaurants that, know that there's something that they sort of need help with, and just being able to provide a little bit of insight or guidance to help them be successful.
Yeah, I love that overview for so many reasons, Crystina. The first of which that I want to call out for listeners is, when we hear Crystina's story, it sounds like she was preparing for something that she didn't know, heck, all of us didn't know was coming. And that's when we hear you talk about in 2019, testing, experimenting with, really optimizing and refining, I think that's the word I'm looking for, curbside to-go orders, for example. That was something that who knew how it was going to benefit you in the future. So I say this so often with all of our entrepreneurial journeys, that we're being uniquely prepared for things that we can't even see in these moments. And Crystina, I think with your experience, it's incredible because I think a lot of people openly acknowledge that the restaurant industry might be the most difficult industry out there because we as consumers, gosh, we have a million choices. I could fire up Yelp or Google Maps right now and I could find 50 restaurants within a 2-mile radius of me here in a city. And so with that in mind, I think that it's fascinating because one thing that you pointed out is you could have the best food. You could have the cutest and coziest Instagrammable restaurant out there. It doesn't mean you're going to succeed. Just like for all of our businesses, if you're the best social media expert, if you're the best web designer, it doesn't mean you're going to succeed. So Crystina, with that in mind, what does determine who succeeds and how we succeed? What are those differentiators? Because having the best food is quite simply not enough.
That's a great question. I think the one thing that I've noticed in just talking to restaurateurs and helping restaurants is the ability to be flexible. And there are small restaurants who, during the pandemic, we're going to close for the pandemic and we'll see you at the end. And they never opened again because they weren't flexible, right? They were just going to hold out and wait out the storm. Also, I think, restaurants who are absolutely draw a line in the sand. We will not work with third-party delivery providers. We will not offer catering. We won't offer online ordering because it's not part of our business model. And the fact of the matter is that unless your kitchen is specifically designed to send food out for only however many guests you have in the restaurant at a time, you have latent capacity. You have the ability to make money, but you have drawn a hard line and you're refusing to take those steps. And there's a lot of discussion in the restaurant world about working with third parties like Uber and DoorDash. And the way that I've always viewed it is as a marketing tool. Each one of these third-party delivery services for their customers, for the end user, is a different refrigerator. So the way that I always explain it to restaurants is, you have an Uber refrigerator, and you are married to Uber or you are married to DoorDash. You have one, maybe two apps on your phone, but there's usually one app that you're using, right? So you open up that refrigerator And that's what's for dinner, right? If my restaurant isn't in the DoorDash refrigerator and you're a DoorDash customer, you will never consider going to my business, right? So the idea of being flexible and allowing yourself to be in these different refrigerators for these different markets of people who you wouldn't normally have access to, right? That's a really logical step for a lot of restaurants. And also just trying new things because so for your restaurant, right, if you are hard-nosed on dine-in, we're only going to do dine-in. But what if your town decides to do a facelift on your street and you have construction, or, you know, the sidewalks are all torn up, or something's happened to your parking lot? If you haven't been flexible already so that you can meet these challenges head on, then you're just playing catch up. If you have no online presence, but a similar restaurant down the road does while you're going through construction, say in your town, that other business is going to have a sort of a leg up, right? Because they've already started taking proactive measures to sort of investigate or explore other verticals. It doesn't mean that it's something that you have to do, you know, full on, and, you know, you can dabble here and there to sort of see what you're comfortable with. But as long as you understand how it works and understand that you can pivot quickly to use those different verticals, I think that's what's most important, is being open-minded, being able to be flexible to different ways of doing business. Because if you know, it's just like a restaurant in like a small coal town, for example, is if they're like, people get out of the coal mines at, you know, 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. and they sort of have an understanding of a specific schedule, and their business is determined by that other business, right? If that other business tanks and goes bankrupt and stops doing work, right, then this small restaurant will suffer because they've based their entire business model on another business. And so I think, you know, again, flexibility is probably the most important trait that a restaurateur can have.
Yeah, I really love that answer, especially with that example, because obviously the pandemic is hopefully a once in a lifetime occurrence. But your example of, hey, if your parking lot gets ripped up, there goes your dine-in. There goes a lot of people who are going to want to spend time there. And we've seen it time and time again. I live in Florida, where things are always being built, being ripped up, being built up. Everything's brand new here. And that's such an important thing. So having that flexibility is extremely important in all of our businesses. And Christina, I really like, obviously, it's an appropriate analogy with your industry of the refrigerators. This is the Uber refrigerator. This is that. I always view it as kind of a marketing toolkit. We know when we're supposed to use a hammer, so we take a hammer out of our toolkit. We know when we're supposed to use a screwdriver. Even in your bio, I feel like we got a glimpse into part of your marketing toolkit, from loyalty programs, gift card systems, offline or online ordering platforms. All of those things are just tools. People might think, oh, these are all the things that I need. These are all the things that define my business. No, they're tools that you use in the right instances. Talk to us about that toolkit of yours, whether it's the loyalty programs, gift cards, obviously online ordering. How are you? I guess it's a two-part question. It's a loaded question, Christina, because I know you'll handle it, and I'm curious to hear your thought process. One, how are you adding to that toolkit as far as maintaining those skills and sharpening those skills? And then two, how do you identify, working with so many different restaurants and clients, when to use certain tools from that toolkit?
That's a great question. So going to how I keep my skills sharpened is just trying to understand all of the different things that are available to restaurants. Most of these tools, right, are products from other companies. So it's just following these companies, making sure I understand how these products work, and understanding what that looks like to a restaurateur. When I was on the brand side, I was supposed to be on a call with a franchisee and some people in leadership, and everybody in leadership was late. But I'd already started talking to the franchisee. And my COO at the time actually called me after the call, and he goes, you know what, you actually know like 40% of the business, which is remarkable considering like how narrow my my job was. But understanding how every department is affected by, adding a new loyalty program, adding or migrating to a new gift card platform, adding online ordering, understanding how that affects all of the other departments in a business. So, the IT team, the accounting team, the supply chain team. So understanding when I'm looking at a new product, how that will affect all of the different departments in the business. So when you're working through a project to onboard a new technology or a new tool, being able to call out and say, these are some of the shareholders or the stakeholders that you're going to need is somebody from accounting, somebody from IT, and really importantly, somebody from operations. With all due respect, people in the restaurant can be a little afraid of change. And if you make that change without taking into consideration how they do their job, then you won't get buy-in from the restaurants. And there's a very good chance that whatever you're implementing will fail because you never took their job into consideration. So sort of understanding what their needs are, super important. But again, with those tools, understanding, how they work, sort of understanding what the box looks like, right? So that you can think outside of it and understand how it affects everybody else. And I completely forgot the second part of your question.
How do you know which tools to use when you're looking at a restaurant?
Yeah, I was super excited about that. Okay, so it depends on the restaurant, and it's in having conversations with the owners and operators, understanding what their frustrations are. It's really interesting. I worked briefly at a consulting company and found out that the conversations that we were having at the brand side, every other brand that I worked with at the consultant group was having the same problem and the same conversations. And the solutions were generally the same solutions. Adding online ordering, adding a loyalty program, adding gift cards, adding an app, making sure that your website is optimized for finding all of those things. And the really, really interesting part is even though the solutions were generally, the same, the way to implement it was different. The conversations were different just because, you have different technology, right? And if you're adding a new technology, or if you're trying to take advantage of the technology you're using in a different way, you have to understand what's already being used and sort of how to change that. It's really interesting because I think a lot of people sort of check those boxes, right? They're like, we need loyalty, so they'll get loyalty, or we need gift cards, so they'll get gift cards. But they don't take full advantage of it, right? So they get gift cards, but maybe they don't get digital gift cards. And digital gift cards are huge, especially if people are looking for last minute birthday gifts or holiday gifts, or they'll have a loyalty program, but they won't use offers in a specific way that maybe their guest would really respond to. So I think more than anything, it's trial and error and listening and understanding sort of where their pain points are to understand how to take advantage of technology that they may have, or sort of identify what technology would be best for them next.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point that you just made, Christina, because I say it all the time where people, for example, I love cold email marketing. I love the right forms of PPC advertising. There are so many different forms of marketing. And a lot of people will say, oh, I tried it. It didn't work. Well, the whole point of any of these things is you need to make it work. They work inherently. If they're working for others, we know that it works as a marketing channel, but you need to make it work for you. And I can't help but think about kind of what the big guys have when it comes to all of these things. Obviously, they've got a lot more resources than smaller restaurants. I think about Starbucks, for example. When I'm in any new city, I don't know the coffee shop scene. I work from coffee shops every day. Starbucks is always like the easiest fallback. As much as I prefer a local craftier coffee shop, But Starbucks is brilliant with, let's take the loyalty program, for example. You'll get 50 bonus stars if you do this today, if you order food with your drink, and they know how to be successful at it. With that in mind, Crystina, I would love to hear your perspective as someone who has enterprise level background and experience, as well as really helping and understanding the smaller restaurants who may feel like they have an unfair disadvantage by not having access to the same resources just straight up. What's your perspective on how those smaller restaurants can compete with those bigger ones that are doing so many of these things correctly?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think again, being flexible, being able to try new things. I mean, the cool thing about small restaurants is that their community bolsters them a lot more than the enterprise level restaurants, right? People who live in the area, a lot of them, will try and go to these smaller restaurants, these smaller coffee shops, because they like supporting their community. So I think community involvement is a big thing. And even enterprise level restaurants talk about local store marketing. So the smaller restaurants being very dedicated to their community, being really involved in the Chamber of Commerce. I'm involved in my local Chamber of Commerce. And there are a lot of the restaurants in our area are also involved, but that helps get them, familiar with a lot of the businesses in the area. And a lot of businesses in the area that are involved in their Chamber of Commerce are, also really dedicated to their community as well. So we'll utilize those small restaurants. Also, getting their name out, getting your name out there, getting people to try you. I really think especially with smaller restaurants, that third-party delivery is a really good idea, because again, you're putting your brand in front of people who may not realize that you're there. Maybe you don't have a super awesome location. Maybe you're like off of the main street. And one way for people to know that you're there is to put yourself in those third-party apps. If you really want to push catering, because business, for restaurants, group orders or catering orders are going to be a really easy way for you to bolster your income. So, interacting with those local businesses, maybe, if you have amazing biscuits, do a biscuit drop, for example. So you drop some biscuits off at some local businesses with a 5% off coupon for their next large order. Maybe you get a food truck, and the food truck you could think of as more of a marketing tool than an actual way to do business. Pull it out every once in a while, or you can actually use it as a catering tool, right? As somebody could rent out your food truck. So again, it's finding different ways to be flexible that those larger businesses probably can't do, right? They can't put the time or effort in putting a food truck into every single one of their restaurants, and it's probably a very low ROI for them. But for a smaller business, something like that could provide you with a lot of flexibility. Also, too, again, if something happens, there's a water main break in your restaurant, or that, a gas leak and all of your gas gets turned off. Maybe you can pivot and just do your food truck in your parking lot, for example, if something like that's happening. So I think, again, it comes down to being flexible and being willing to try new things.
Yeah, Christina, I feel like you just came up with that example right here in real time on the air of dropping off the biscuits. And in my head, I'm like, that is absolutely brilliant. I remember all the summer internships that I had. Gosh, all of us interns around lunchtime, we would get together and be like, where do we want to order from today? Wherever we picked was getting a huge order from the office. And if you were the only restaurant that dropped off biscuits, 100% you're getting our order for that day. So yeah, I really love that example. Speaking to you obviously have a brilliant marketing mind and business mind, but I also think it's fun to tap into the mind of Crystina, the entrepreneur, Crystina, the business owner. You've already mentioned the Chamber of Commerce, for example. Talk to us entrepreneur to entrepreneur from your perspective on how are you getting those clients? Because you don't have biscuits that you can drop off, but there are other ways that you can plant those seeds and share that value with other people. Share some of those insights with us from a business owner perspective.
Yeah. I mean, the Chamber of Commerce. So I'm right outside of Minneapolis. I'm part of the Minneapolis area Chamber of Commerce. So I've been able to talk to restaurateurs, but also because I have a lot of experience with the technological onboardings for restaurants, sort of talking to companies that actually support restaurants too. I've gotten some business that way. The Chamber, so the Chamber, also on LinkedIn, just being really active on LinkedIn and making myself an expert in the space of off-premise on LinkedIn. It's there is a huge community for people who are interested in off-premise for restaurants, but there are a lot of support companies, for example, who kind of handle off-premise, but sort of only if they have to. So I've been able to provide some guidance and support to restaurant support companies that way. I think those are the two main ways, or just, through contacts. I am fortunate enough to have a pretty decent network on LinkedIn of people who I've worked with through the years for at the enterprise level with restaurants, or have met at conferences. As my business scales too, the plan is to attend some of those really specific restaurant conferences to talk specifically with the restaurateurs that attend those conferences. So I think for me, those are the three big ones. I'm still working through my website SEO. That's been a whole bag of worms, but I think that's one of the ways that I'm looking to improve my ability to meet clients where they're at too, is through the SEO, and plans to do targeted marketing on LinkedIn and possibly Facebook or Reddit.
Yeah, I love hearing those insights, Crystina, for two reasons. One is that I love the transparency and, hey, here's what's working for me. And that's really important insights for other people, especially all the entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs around the world who are listening. But two, you really shared some of those growth plans with us and what you already have your eyes on. So I would argue that later on in 2024, when people look at your agency and they're like, how did Crystina grow that? It's because you're already thinking about those future building blocks today. So it's going to be no mistake when those things start working in your business. And I love that perspective. With that in mind, I'm always fascinated by other businesses' sales processes, because getting in and having the right conversations, I would argue that it's intimidating. It can be hard, but it's also very simple. It's not rocket science. It's about having conversations and showing value to people. Crystina, a lot of people say that it's really hard to get in with local businesses. I've been there before. I started my marketing agency in Boston in 2012, and we would just walk into like local sandwich shops, local restaurants, local legal offices, and we would kind of have conversations. We wouldn't necessarily pitch our services. We would just initiate those conversations, and the Chamber obviously helped initiate those. What's your process like? What's that first conversation look like? What are the pain points that you're picking for that you can serve? I'd love to hear your perspective on those.
That's a great question. First, I'll prep for the meeting, because since we're most often talking about their off-premise offerings, the first place I go is their website. How are you currently offering online ordering? Are you currently offering catering? How do I know? So going to their website and just kind of doing an evaluation, looking at how their online ordering or their catering is sort of set up on their website, making notes on that. And then in that sales call, just listening, understanding, I can assume what their pain points are, or I can notice areas for improvement when I'm on their website. But if we have that conversation and that's not top of mind, then that sort of derails the whole conversation, right? They'll stop listening if what I'm talking about has nothing to do with what their needs are. So it's just listening to those pain points, being able to, I think there are two things that sort of make the call right. As one, I know what I'm talking about. I've worked in the space with several different brands, so I can understand where they're coming from when they're talking about what their pain points are, and just being I guess there's three. Just being curious, right? Like really trying to understand specifically those pain points that they're having, but also being excited, right? Being excited about helping people improve, helping, most small restaurants, it's blood, sweat, and tears, right? This isn't something that they just, hopefully, didn't just decide to do as an investment opportunity, right? Like they had a passion for food and they decided to share that passion with the world, right? So me being passionate about helping something that they're super passionate about, I think that comes across when I'm talking to them. So, we can get really jazzed about doing a project together. And I think that that's really important.
Yes, I absolutely love where you took that question, Crystina. I think that right there is a masterclass in truly personal and authentic sales, because it really is just genuine conversations. And what I heard from your approach is that classic quote that I absolutely love, which is seek first to understand and then to be understood. So many of us business owners, we really think that we need to go in there and force upon them. This is what I can do. These are the results that you're going to get. Look at how good I am. I've done it with other restaurants, other businesses. But the reality is, listen to them. This is, you correctly pointed out, I don't think we've ever spelled it out that clearly here on the show, is that when we're talking to our potential clients, if we are a B2B company or agency like your business is, we're serving their baby. They love their business. We need to let that love shine, and we need to share that love with them and that excitement. So I think that goes a long way. Crystina, you have so many insights. I tooted your horn at the top of this episode as a brilliant, not only marketing, but also business mind. And you've so put that on display here. But the hardest part for every episode is always for the guest to somehow summarize an actionable takeaway for listeners. So if they're sitting here thinking, whether they're a restaurant or not a restaurant owner, and they're thinking, gosh, I want to start having these tools in my toolkit. I want to start making these strategic decisions. I want to start getting more clients or growing my business. What's that one takeaway that you hope every listener walks away with?
Be flexible. When you're looking for new business of whatever kind, try everything. Try everything twice. Like Brian, you said earlier, you can try something one time and it may not work. Try it again. Try attacking something from a different angle. Don't be afraid to sort of engage with new technologies and understand how they work. It may not work for you now, but it is something that you can put away in your toolkit. And if you do need it later, you can take it out and dust it off. But be flexible, be willing to try new things, and just be open to change.
Yeah, really sound advice for every single one of us. There's not a single entrepreneur where Crystina's advice does not apply. So every single one of us, we need to take that on board and, most importantly, put it into practice. So Crystina, with all of that said, I'm going to toot your horn just a little bit more, because you talked about being excited in front of our prospective clients, people we're not even working with yet today. And that's why I absolutely love your website. First of all, I love your domain. I'm so excited for you to tell listeners where they can find your website. But the thing I want to call out on your website is that your messaging is excited. I mean, the big headline right there, we make restaurant online ordering rock. If off-premise doesn't work, on-premise, it doesn't work. Period. Like, there's so much energy and excitement in your messaging on your website. So I'm going to let you take this stage. Tell listeners where they can go to learn more about you, your business, and all the great things that you're doing.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Brian. Everybody, you can find me at makegoodlemonade.com. Feel free to sign up for our newsletter. We have a couple of really exciting things that we're doing early this year that I would love to share with you as soon as we make it public.
Yes, I love that domain name. I can't believe that you got it, Crystina. MakeGoodLemonade.com. That's where you can find Crystina's business website. We are also linking to Crystina's personal LinkedIn down below in the show notes. So listeners, you know the drill. Wherever it is that you're tuning into today's episode, scroll right on down. You'll find those two links, MakeGoodLemonade.com, as well as a link to Crystina's personal LinkedIn. Otherwise, Crystina, on behalf of myself and all the listeners around the world, thanks so much for coming on and being so transparent and generous with all your knowledge and experience with us.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate it.